Back in the 1960s, there was a growing fear that hundreds of millions of lives will be lost to starvation as the supply of food struggled to keep up with the explosive growth in the world population, especially in the developing countries like India. But we didn't see the grim prediction come true, even though the population growth was mostly correct. And humanity was able to avoid the grim prediction thanks to the works of one man, Norman Borlaug. Norman Borlaug was born in 1914 in the state of Iowa and was raised by Norwegian-American parents Henry and Clara Borlaug. Norman Borlaug spent most of his young life growing up on a farm, helping his father with the 106-acre family farm and learning to value the fruits of labor in the fields. And Norman Borlaug would have continued to work for the family farm like most boys did in the early 1900s. But Norman's teacher and cousin, Sina Borlaug, saw Norman's promise as a student and convinced his parents to allow Norman to continue his education. After entering high school, Norman Borlaug worked on a farm as a farmhand, where he worked for 50 cents a day to save up for college. He went on to college to prepare for a career as a schoolteacher, but the job market was in a very bad place because of the Great Depression. And so, he changed track and majored in agricultural science. And during his college years, Borlaug attended a lecture from Dr. Elvin Stockman, where he talked about rust, a parasitic fungus that preyed on a large variety of plants, including crops like wheat. Borlaug was so entranced by Dr. Stockman's lecture that he asked to be admitted to a PhD program in plant pathology. After graduating with his PhD degree in 1942, Dr. Borlaug worked for DuPont in the midst of World War II. And in 1944, Dr. Borlaug accepted a position to work on a research project in Mexico. And in this position, Dr. Borlaug saw firsthand how wheat farmers were suffering from poor harvests. In a letter to his wife, he said, quote, "These places I've seen have clubbed my mind. They are so poor and depressing. I don't know what we can do to help these people, but we've got to do something." End quote. This was in 1944, when farmers were plagued by rust and raised less than half of the wheat necessary to meet the demand of the Mexican population. Borlaug and his team worked for 13 years to develop a disease-resistant wheat, but there were still issues. For example, the newly developed wheat yielded more grain per head and was resistant to diseases like rust, but the heavier heads of grain did not have stems strong enough to support the heads, and so when wind or rain came, the wheat would fall to the ground and become useless. So Dr. Borlaug came up with the solution to crossbreed the new wheat with Japanese dwarf strains, which had characteristics of shorter and thus more durable stems that can support the heavier heads of the wheat. Dr. Borlaug and his team's work had paid off big. By 1956, Mexico was able to achieve self-sufficiency, and many considered their work an agricultural miracle. And countries and organizations took notice. The UN and the Rockefeller Foundation asked Borlaug to help bring his expertise to the Middle East and South Asia, where the problem of extreme poverty and failed harvests plagued the population. And so he did. In the early 1960s, his approach to wheat breeding was brought to multiple countries like Egypt, Syria, Turkey, and Pakistan. And Dr. Borlaug's wheat technology was adapted to other grains like rice, which are more popular grains in Asian countries. And it was very effective. Crop yields rose 4 times in Pakistan and India, and many countries became self-sufficient in a short amount of time. Dr. Borlaug's accomplishments and efforts did not go unrecognized. By 1970, he received the Nobel Peace Prize, the first and the only agricultural scientist to do so. Dr. Borlaug passed away in September of 2009, but his legacy is still ongoing. Even after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Borlaug knew that there was still work to be done. The International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, also abbreviated as CIMMYT, worked with Dr. Borlaug to help spur on the Green Revolution in the 1950s and 60s, and is still operating today to help farmers grow more nutritious and resilient maize and wheat cropping systems. And as the consequences of global warming are becoming more real, The development of resilient crops that can survive the harsher weather will be ever so important. If you want to learn more about CIMMYT and its parent organization, CGIAR, links to their website will be in the description. That's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, please hit the subscribe button with the bell notification icon turned on, and I will see you guys in the next one.